The nature of programming is shifting. AI is now infiltrating comp sci. The time we're in right now is a very unique opportunity. You know, it's a once in a lifetime kind of opportunity to see this kind of transformation happen.
So I know you manage like 16,000 employees, right? How do you deal with the stress that comes with it?
I'll tell you, that's probably the toughest thing for the last 30 years, is work-life balance. We've been given the gift of life, but we only have one in this life. Your choice is, how do you want to take the time? How do you want to optimize? How do you want to create the best version of you?
If you had a magic phone and you could broadcast one message to the entire world, what would it be?
Wow, that's a good one.
Hey everyone, welcome to a brand new episode. This one is an extremely special one in the fact that we have an established leader. He's literally the ex-president of Bank of America, of Xerox. He managed $8 billion of funding. He's currently working on an AI company called IRPA. So if you tune in, you're gonna learn a lot and you're gonna be able to definitely take one or two things that you can apply in your life and learn about things that you've never heard before. Okay, so what do we have to know about you and your early life to understand how your life turned out?
Well, so that's a long story and maybe more than an hour, but I'll try to give you a synthesis of it. So I'm the son of a first generation immigrant, like many folks are. And being of Southeast Asian descent, I had three choices: a doctor, an engineer, or nothing. So those were kind of the choices. So I pursued an honors biochemistry degree. I was pre-med. Realized very quickly that I really hated it, much to my parents' chagrin. And what shaped me, quite honestly, was a love for business. I did a double degree in business and economics instead. And then I entered the workforce, and I looked for opportunities to kind of dive into areas that I was not familiar with. I was just naturally acquisitive. And I think as I look back, that's probably the most important thing that shaped the decisions I made, coupled with kind of the work ethic that I got from my parents.
Wow. And was there a defining moment in your experience that kind of led you into this field? So you did your master's in a management field, right? And now you're doing automation and AI. So
yeah. No, that's a great question. They're actually not as disjointed as you would think. The reality is, I have a undergrad in business economics and an MBA, and it was all about how to lean into and lead organizations. I'm a process guy from 30 years ago. That was kind of my natural orientation, and automation is just a natural evolution of process visibility. AI, where we're headed, is another further extrapolation of that capability. And at the end of the day, you have to realize that technology innovation has to have a purpose. Mm-hmm. In corporate America or the corporate environment, it's about performance, it's about execution, it's about speed, agility, innovation. And automation is just a precursor to or an enabler of that outcome. Mm. And so it's been a natural evolution. Excuse me, for me, it's just been a natural evolution of where I started 30 years ago.
What do you feel like is the next technology that you guys are going to be focusing on? Is it AI agents? Is it?
Yeah, in fact, we're already doing work with AI agents and smart agents. I think, it's interesting. There's been inflection points over the last 30 years that have changed the way organizations have operated. And I go back to things before your time, which were concepts like TQM, Lean Six Sigma. Then there was this whole focus on automation about 10 to 12 years ago. And that was a major inflection point, because that created one of two reactions. Mm-hmm. Either I'm going to get automated out of a job, or I can accelerate business performance. Mm-hmm. And the reality is it really leaned towards the latter. This is about enabling performance. And what the realization is automation didn't eliminate jobs. It changed the nature of the work that needed to be done. It changed the skill sets that were required in the marketplace. Yeah. And so folks who had a fear, if you were doing kind of mind-numbing data entry, you need to upskill. Yeah. Because that job's going to disappear, and it did. AI, I think, is the next evolution. The next tool. Yeah. But it's in the series of the same kind of expectations of impact to business. Mm-hmm. The one difference I think AI is going to have is the impact is going to be exponentially more. Mm-hmm. I think that's an inflection point. AI creates a point of inflection, because automation, an RPA was a big shift, but it was not transformative. Mm-hmm. AI is going to be transformative, and you used a great example of it with AI agents, with data science, with optimizing and synthesizing information at a pace that we've never seen. Mm-hmm. We've launched an AI-based radiology solution that allows us to diagnose with a level of accuracy that today radiologists can't match. So that speed to diagnosis is a transformative impact of AI. Whereas in the past, if you were just automating radiology interaction, you wouldn't get that level of impact.
Yeah. I think a lot of people they're scared of like AI taking their jobs. But like as you were saying, right, it'll create new opportunities. So like I think I tell this to some people, where I've heard this on a podcast as well, and they were talking about how back in the day, mathematicians, right, there used to be so many mathematicians spending so much time doing these calculations, like long division, long multiplication. And so when the calculator came out, that it didn't get rid of their jobs. They just went to do different things because the calculator, it helped automate that process. And so I think AI will, I guess, probably do the same thing.
Well,
right?
it will. I'll tell you in an example with just AI agents, where there's a lot of agents today, and you pick your call center you're going to call into. You've got a problem, you've got a resolution, you've got an issue that's pretty rudimentary to solve. Well, AI agents can take care of that. What it means now is the human factor should be focused on more complex interactions. That's so what you're asking AI agent is stripping off the mundane activity, the lower complexity work, high transaction volume work that allows the human to now interact with a more complex kind of event. A great example was, in the banking and financial services sector today, if you got an RRSP and you want to know what fund should I invest in, an AI agent can tell you what the best returns are and timeframes. That's easy. But if you want to do retirement planning, you need a little bit more human intervention because it's personal. Because I've got a family, I've got dependents, I've got my unique situation. It's a little harder for AI, at least at where the stage we are today, to be able to accommodate that kind of an interaction.
So AI is much more about taking over the basic tasks that are very repetitive across industries, is what you're saying. And so in your experience, B2B is most of your experience. What are some of those tasks that AI agents have taken over, and how have people shifted? What exactly have the roles been?
Yeah, I'll tell you, it's both B2B and B2C. I think we've, when you think about, on the B2B side, it could easily be contract compliance. So one of the biggest challenges for organizations that have a indirect set of channel partners that are helping them execute in the marketplace, or a large supply chain that they're sourcing their materials and inputs from. When you're doing an audit or you're doing contract review, usually there's, you have tens of thousands of relationships. You're picking a subset of those contracts to do an assessment or an audit on. It's a sample set. Well, all of a sudden AI can do all of them. So all of a sudden the risks that you had that were masked because they weren't part of what was selected in terms of your audit pool becomes a non-issue, because now I can synthesize all of those contracts and I can integrate those contracts into day-to-day interaction by saying, I'm doing a transaction, now bump it up against a contract requirement. Automation doesn't give you that capability yet. And the human factor is that's too complex. I can't cycle through all of those contracts and all of that detail or that data. So that's a major shift on the B2B side. On the B2C side, it's simple things like, if you phone Amazon, anybody who's an Amazon Prime customer, you phone the call center, the first 15 to 20 minutes are all an AI agent, and it may be the totality of your interaction. You make a reservation on United Airlines, I can do it all with an AI agent if it's a straightforward. But if I'm going to have 10 stops and a lot of complexity, I'm probably going to want to default to a human agent who can walk that and give me choices. But if I know where I'm going, I know the date, it's pretty easy. I'm in, I'm done, I'm out.
Right. And for students who are starting their career right now, university students such as ourselves, even younger high school kids, a lot of them, when we started, AI wasn't that big of a thing, right? Obviously in your industry that was there. You had seen automation 10, 12 years, but mainstream has only really started 2021 with the start of ChatGPT and all these newer AI agents. So what advice would you give to these students who are coming in? Should they focus more on these technical aspects to understand the lower level things, or would you say much more from a success standpoint for their career? Should they focus much more on using these tools as just like how Aman said, as a calculator, right, for mathematicians?
I think very much the latter. First of all, the guidance I would give is don't believe the rhetoric and don't be afraid. You got to lean into this. You guys are the time we're in right now is a very unique opportunity, and it's a once in a lifetime kind of opportunity to see this kind of transformation happen. You can't be afraid of it. Because right now nobody has a perfect crystal ball. Nobody knows where this is going to end up. But I would very much coach them to kind of lean into leveraging the technology and figuring out where's the art of the possible here. What does it enable? How can you accelerate some of the things today that when I was your age, you couldn't have even contemplated. You couldn't even do it manually, let alone through an automated means. I think that's the real opportunity because the roles are going to shift. I mean, think about where we were 20 years ago when Apple introduced the iPhone, right? There are jobs today that exist. App developers weren't a thing 20 years ago, right? So there's an entire industry shift that happens, and AI is just going to generate some of that. And I think you got to be open to the possibilities, but look at a way to innovate and leverage things like data synthesis, things like process controls, insights that allow you to process and understand information at a pace that we humanly have never been able to do. Now, how does that drive outcomes? Irrespective of whatever industry you're in, what does that do, and how do you drive an outcome, whether that's a client outcome, whether that's a performance-based outcome, whatever that may be.
To be much more outcome-driven.
You have to be outcome-driven. That's the world we live in now. It's about performance, it's about outcomes, and it's about risk. Those are the things to focus in on.
So to learn these skills, let's say you're 18 again, right? And you had to pick a major in college, what would you pick?
I think the days of being super specialized are gone. You can't be 10 miles deep and 2 inches wide in terms of knowledge. Also, the days of being kind of the jack of all trades and master of none, I think are gone too. You can't be 20 miles wide and an inch deep. My viewpoint is you have to pick a set of capabilities or a set of skills that allow you to go deep, but they have to be wide enough and general enough. Because unless you want to be an actuarial scientist and just have a small niche of what you're accountable for, then I think you have the opportunity to build a career there because there's a shortage of actuarial scientists. But the reality is I think there's an opportunity to go deeper. So I think multiple disciplines work. I coached some students today and I said, look, a broad business major, a business finance combination, an economics, finance, poli-sci combination. It's about your agility. It's not just about your, academic proficiency. Because at the end of the day, you're going to have to talk to people and you're going to have to engage.
What about computer science?
Computer science, absolutely. It's evolving, but the nature of programming is shifting. Are you going to be, I was doing Fortran and C programming when I was coming out of university, right? Now, there's no more Y2K, so those days are gone. But the reality is AI is now infiltrating comp sci, and data science is infiltrating comp sci. So the nature of computer science is evolving. And I think that's what you've got to be open to.
Yeah. Sundar Pichai said AI is probably the most important thing humanity has ever worked on. And I think of it as something more profound than electricity or fire. So many people compare AI to the .com bubble, as we're talking about. And AI is, like I said, a buzzword that's being thrown around for every industry. So which specific industries do you think are going to be the most impacted? And which do you think are kind of just overhyped industries?
Well, so that's an interesting question. I don't think any industry is safe. Let me put it that way. I don't mean safe in a bad way. I mean safe in a good way. I don't think any industry is safe from not being impacted by AI. The ones that I think are highly leverageable are industries like healthcare. I do a lot of work in the healthcare sector, and globally we spend, based on 2022 data, as a planet we spent almost $9 trillion on healthcare. Wow. Now in the U.S., which is where I'm based, we spend 47 cents of every dollar that's spent on the planet is spent in the U.S. Wow. Now the problem with that is the fact that the U.S. healthcare system does not have an outcome which places it in the top kind of care category of anything, life expectancy, infant mortality, et cetera, because it's being overwhelmed with cost. I think that's a huge opportunity because now with the radiology solution we've developed, we can actually do radiology screening in rural towns in, dipwad anywhere, meaning in some rural town where they don't even have electricity. We've got portable devices that can go and screen for TB.
Wow.
So I think to what was said, AI now has the ability to potentially wipe out TB as an issue on the planet. We've never been able to do that. And the other issue is why healthcare is so opportunistic is it's the least penetrated with kind of leading edge technology. There's pieces and parts of where it's connected, but there's a lot of fragmentation in healthcare today.
Okay. I see you own a patent, right, for it's called FICO?
Yeah, it's a healthcare patent that I had when I was leading the BPO business at Xerox, and we call it we call it the healthcare FICO score.
Mm-hmm.
And the genesis behind that was, again, I've spent about 17 years in the healthcare space, and helping clients manage their healthcare execution for their employees. So we covered about 54 million US-based employees for healthcare. And the biggest challenge that employees have, or individuals have, generally speaking, it's not that different in Canada, is the fact that people have no idea how to manage their health. They don't know when they get insurance. Now, this is a very U.S.-centric challenge because in Canada you have OHIP and it's socialized healthcare. In the U.S., it's a for-profit healthcare system. So employers offer healthcare to their employees. It's not government offered. Mm-hmm. That's only after you retire with Medicare and Medicaid. So the problem with employers is I have to go to a third-party insurer, like a large company like United Healthcare. And so United Healthcare says, wow, let's say you're Verizon. You got a bunch of guys driving a truck and climbing poles and digging ditches. They're going to get hurt. Mm-hmm. So your insurance premium is going to be high because you're a risk. You got a high-risk employee base. Then they'll turn around and they'll go to a company like Meta, and they'll say, engineers sitting at a desk. Oh my God, your risk is high, carpal tunnel syndrome, and they're sitting too long. They got back pain. And then they'll say, well, that's why your premiums are high. Well, as I was looking at this, I said, because I got to see every industry across 54 million employees. I said, well, who's paying the low rate?
Exactly.
No one. Because no one has visibility to risk. And so that was the real genesis of the healthcare FICO score is like when you go to get a mortgage, if you've got a 900 FICO, you get the best rates because you're low risk. If you got a 200 FICO, you're not going to get a mortgage because you're way too high risk. Well, I took that same kind of structure and I said, well, now let's apply it to healthcare. If you are in good health and you're doing preemptive screening and you're exercising and you've got low risk, then you should pay very little for your healthcare, relatively speaking. But if you've got diabetes and you don't exercise at all and you eat bonbons all day and all that kind of stuff, well, then you should pay higher risk because it's your own personal perspective. Right. It's your choice. And so that was the genesis of the healthcare FICO score, and we're trying to figure out a way to create it and deploy it into the marketplace. And there's a lot of resistance because insurance companies don't want transparency.
Yeah. How do you persuade? So like you do a lot of B2B, right? How do you persuade people to adapt these new technologies?
Well, first of all, you can't make it about the technology.
Yeah.
And you can't make it about you. You have to make it about them. Mm-hmm. And you can't talk to them in the context of, hey, this is going to be really cool, or this is really, I've got some really great features, or this is a great algorithm. What you have to talk about is what's the impact and what's the outcome that's going to benefit them. How do you de-risk whatever they're doing? And so when I have conversations with C-level executives, I never talk about us and I never talk about our products or our services. I talk about the fact that they're trying to drive revenue. They're trying to retain clients. They're trying to grow relationships. Those business outcomes are how you have to kind of talk about the technology and the capabilities you have, because it has to be about them, but about them in the context of the outcomes that they're responsible to deliver against.
In terms of ethics, right? AI, there's a lot of controversy about that. Elon Musk actually said that we need to be super careful with AI, potentially more dangerous than nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
And so
everybody's got this picture of Terminator 3 in the back of their mind and the rise of the machines and all of that, I'm sure, yes.
So despite that being said, how does your team prioritize the ethical considerations when developing these AI solutions for other businesses?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, it's a really good question. And in one of the roles I have for one of the startups, I'm the president of the Americas for a company called Wysa. And it's a mental health, AI-based mental health app. Now, when you think about ethical guardrails around mental health and clinical outcomes, we've trained the AI based on clinical guidelines, which by default limits its ability to go across those kind of barriers that we've built. And those guidelines that are clinical guidelines, that's where ethical clinical intervention is demonstrated. So imagine a situation where you're a student and you're having the worst year of your life, and you call a hotline and you think, it's it, I'm done. I'm going to go, and that's it. And the AI tool that's helping to counsel you is saying, and the direction to the highest bridge is there. That's not what you want the AI base to do. What you want it to do is say, look, we've already called 911, or we've connected you to the campus counselors, et cetera. That's what a guardrail creates. So you have to have an understanding of what business problems you're trying to solve, what the big risks are with those business problems, and that then starts to inform where's that fine line.
Right.
You know, and we spent a lot of time and a lot of investment in building our AI mental health engine with specifically guidelines that are focused on the right clinical data and the right clinical outcomes.
Was there a specific reason as to why you chose to work on Wysa? Like, is it something that like hits close to home? Or?
It does, and you know, thankfully, it's not the same challenges that we have in Canada. But in the U.S., one of the biggest challenges that we have for student populations are school shootings. There's a school shooting every day in the U.S., and it's, you know, with the gun lobbies as strong as they are, and with the Republican administrations that generally come in and are heavily influenced, there's no end in sight to solve a very basic problem, and that further is I think exacerbated by this whole plethora of social media, right? When I was going to school, you couldn't get us out of recess, right? You couldn't get us back in. Now it's a very different environment, right? Kids are isolated. They're isolated because of cyberbullying. They're isolated because of technology. They're not in the in crowd. They didn't have the right, clothes to wear or the right shoes to wear, et cetera. There's a lot more challenges that are affecting, developing minds in all the way down to public schools, not even middle school or high school. These problems are public school related. Yeah. And so I said, look, there's an opportunity for us to engage every school board. In the U.S., there's 14,000 school boards. There's an opportunity for us to pitch this and make this a way to help students manage their health. Athletes, students, professionals, this mental health issue is a problem across the board. And the beauty of Wysa specifically, I've been involved in a lot of private equity funding for a lot of mental health apps, and I never engaged them because the problem is they were always looking to monetize data, monetize information about the candidates that they had. Specifically, what sets Wysa apart is they will not capture any personal data. So the altruistic vision is actually there because they're not monetized. There's not a hidden Trojan horse that says, look, we're going to grab a bunch of data and sell it to pharma companies about, new pills that can be used to manage mental health. That's not the approach at all. And that's what drew me to Wysa.
And so what's actually happening is it's beneficial for the school boards themselves, and even from a business perspective, right? If you want to look at it from that way, because humans who have better mental health are generally more productive. So there's
no question about it.
Win-win involved for everyone.
100%. And, the school boards today, I mean, think about it. The conversations in the U.S. are laughable whenever there's a school shooting because every senator is going to line up or thoughts and prayers. Keep your thoughts and prayers. It doesn't do anything for the family. And it doesn't do anything for somebody who lost a child. I can't imagine that kind of pain that a parent goes through or a sibling goes through. What we need are real solutions. And this actually is a great solution. It helps the individual. It helps the school board. It helps anybody that is around an individual who's what I call, it has the ability to impact the affected and the afflicted, right? And so we're having conversations right now with hospitals that have large oncology centers to say, look, somebody gets diagnosed with cancer, somebody who has an addiction, they're not the only ones impacted. It's their entire family. But who's helping them manage or cope? Nobody, unless they've got tools on their own, which are rare. Yeah. And so all of a sudden now, we're having conversations with the largest addiction, center in the U.S., the Betty Ford Center, and saying, look, when somebody comes for treatment and they're in your location, that's great. But the hard part is when they leave and go back to the environment that caused them to have the addiction in the first place. Who's going to be there at 2:00 in the morning? Who's going to help them on a Friday afternoon? There's no AA meeting they can go to. With Wysa, it's available 724, 365. Right. And so from that perspective, it's a great way to think about how to create productivity, how to minimize negative impacts, and drive performance. It's a good thing across the board.
Is there a way that you're able to measure this performance, the change that Wysa is doing currently, and where are you guys at with that?
Yeah, that was a great question. We've actually got the most robust clinical findings. We've done joint relationships and findings with the National Health Service, the NHS in the UK. We've done it with Harvard. We've done it with Columbia University. We've done it with the Cleveland Clinic, et cetera, in the US. And we actually have demonstrated that individuals engage more effectively and longer with an AI-based mental health app. And the reason is very simple. There's no judgment. If I'm sitting in front of a counselor, am I really going to be as open? Is the slight tweak that they have in their eyelid going to say, "Oh, I can't believe you said that," or "I can't believe you do that," or there's no judgment. It's a very kind of a cathartic kind of interaction where there is no judgment, there's no expectation, and people feel more comfort. If you feel more comfortable, you're going to engage longer. If you engage longer, you're going to have more benefit. And we've got clinical data that demonstrates almost a 3x duration versus the standard counselor environment. I mean, imagine University of Toronto, where they'll have in their student center a counselor, an office counselor, right in the middle of the rotunda. How many students are going to go into that office and watch in front of all of their peers somebody, he needs mental health?
Yeah, no shot.
Nobody's going to do it. And I understand why.
Yeah.
Because no one wants to be that guy or that gal.
Yeah.
Right.
It's a very private thing. And so counselors are great. I'm not saying counselors aren't great, but the problem is, don't kid yourself that counselors are the best solution, because if I get to you in the first place, I'm probably not going to be as open. And we have data to prove that you won't be. And you won't engage as long. And it's all about building tools. And that's where engagement helps.
Yeah.
Do you feel like people longs for that human connection, though? That AI.
Well, so I let me tell you the entire solution for Wysa. So you're front-ended by an AI-based interaction model. You have the ability to pivot to and be transferred to a certified counselor as well, available 7/24, 365. And so as we're looking at solutions, we've now deployed at University of Monterrey, which is in Mexico. It's about 150,000 public school, middle school, university, and then college kind of ecosystem.
Yeah.
And they've got counselors on staff in their campuses. So for us, if there's any point of escalation, automatically routes to their counselors. So we have the ability for you to engage with a human as and when you need. And it's literally automatic.
Wow, that's an amazing idea.
Yeah.
In terms of being a father and managing these businesses, I'm curious to know, how do you go about managing your time?
I'll tell you, that's probably the toughest thing for the last 30 years, is work-life balance. And my daughter knows it. I resigned from, I was group president at Xerox for one of their BPO services. And I resigned because I was spending too much time away. And my children were very young. They were 4 and 5 at the time. And so it was a wake-up call for me. I was away 2 weeks out of every month. And so that was hard. A lot harder for them than I think for me, but very hard for me because I missed a lot. And so it's finding that right balance. And when I left corporate America after 24 years, the reason I haven't gone back to corporate America is because I have the flexibility to do the things that I want to do when and how and where I want to do them. And so that's why the board relationships or the startup relationships or the engagements that I do are on my time and allow me to do it at a pace that I want, at the intensity that I want.
Wow. Well, that's amazing. I think a lot of people want to find a work-life balance, and it's difficult for them to prioritize one over the other. So it seems like you've really found your groove there.
Yeah, it took me a while. It's and I'll tell you, it's a never-ending challenge, at least for me. It's just the way I'm wired, that I love engaging in things, and it's hard to find that balance.
How do you de-stress? Like, do you paint? Do you what's your hobbies like? I'm curious to know. Because managing these big corporations, you need some way to blow some steam.
I enjoy movies. I enjoy traveling. I like to read. I love getting information because I think it keeps your brain cells active and it keeps you connected. And this world is getting more and more complex. And so I think that for me, I think I have a very high stress threshold regardless, but just kind of exercising and doing those things are no different than I think what most people do.
Do you have 3 books that any young person can take and see a lot of success in their life?
You know, I've got a different perspective on books in terms of static reading. I'm more of the view that there are multiple sources of information that you can and should synthesize. I think the problem with books is it's too static and it's too stale because the world is moving at too fast a pace. And so I do a lot of, I lead a lot of white papers from a McKinsey, Deloitte, BCG, Bain, good ideas of kind of industry trends. I've got a lot of alerts where I've got sources like, CNBC, Squawk, Morgan Stanley, et cetera. And I've set them up so they just kind of come to me and I synthesize that very quickly. I find what I like and I have that as a way to kind of get a broad distribution of data across multiple issues, multiple industries, multiple kind of innovations. And for me, that works very well.
How do you go around like summarizing all the data? Do you use like AI, like
I was about to
ChatGPT?
say, maybe we need to create a Rohail AI.
Well, I'm definitely on board for that. I think that there's I've used it a lot. I use AI a lot. I use chat and AI a lot. When I do presentations to leaders and my clients, I just came from a session with an organization that's privately held right now in Boston called MathWorks. They created a market themselves almost 40 years ago, and they're a technology that's leveraging kind of design specs that allow organizations like Lockheed Martin and Tesla to build simulations in cyberspace. Right? It's called digital twinning, and so I was prepping for that session with their senior leadership. And I was doing a lot of research, and I used ChatGPT to synthesize earnings calls from Tesla or earnings calls from Lockheed Martin. I've done that for many years on my own, but it's 4 or 5 hours of time. So now it's 20 seconds.
I think that gives me a lot of happiness because I know for my own work, I've done a lot of ChatGPT. It's good to see an industry professional like you as well.
No, I don't. The cautionary tale for students is always, I don't submit that without, kind of doing that. There's a whole different ballgame there, but. I think chat is a phenomenal tool to synthesize information. The one caution I've always shared with my teams and clients is remember that chat only accesses public information. And the world we live in today is much about misinformation as it is about actual fact-based information. So don't just assume whatever you see and whatever you get is gospel. You've got to validate and triangulate that and make sure it's accurate. Because in a client environment, you get one chance to look competent in front of an executive. If you blow it, you won't get there.
How could they go about validating that information? How do you prepare for these big meetings?
I look, in just what I was doing a week and a half ago, I know what MathWorks as a client is actually focused on. I know their business. So when I look at what is being synthesized for their customers, I look at now how that information can be impacted by what MathWorks capabilities are. And so there's ways to validate information. You can look at additional data sources. It's knowledge you have about the organization, about what you hear. And that's why the other alerts are very important. I'm constantly getting information, but I also very much focus on the sources of that information. I don't have any alerts from Fox News, as an example, right? And I never will. I don't have third-party sources that aren't credible. It's those that are credible and viewed as credible. NPR. There's those BBC. Those they're kind of on the bubble now. But regardless, there are data sources that allow you to validate content.
Very interesting. Yeah, you're right. It's important to have a plethora of different sources so you also don't get biased with just one view, right?
And that's a really important point. I mean, you look at X, you look at Facebook. That's we just had an election in the U.S. So the Republicans are coming in, and unfortunately Trump is coming in again. But the reality is the two most highly searched Google searches post the election in red states. What is a tariff? And is Obamacare the same thing as the Affordable Care Act? So that just tells you the misinformation.
Most people don't even know what is going on.
They have no idea. And it's a little late to figure it out after you voted. So misinformation is an important thing to think of.
Huge. In terms of this is something I'm really curious about. So for people that are going to be managing, so I know you manage like 16,000 employees, right? How do you deal with the stress that comes with it? Like Because
Yeah.
all these people are dependent on you in a sense, right?
You know, I'll tell you, it's that last point you said is really important. I think there's two types of leaders that I've come across in my career and in my travels. The bulk of leaders, I would say more than 50% are, it's a job, it's a role, you got to do what you got to do.
Yeah.
I'm not cut from that cloth. My philosophy on leadership is you have to engage and you have to lead from the front. People have to be able to see you model what you expect to have from them. Because of the very point that you just made, people's livelihood are in your hands.
Yeah.
And so that's a responsibility that I think both from a leadership perspective and spiritually is very important, because you can affect the livelihood of families and you can't be just dismissive about what that means. So that means your sincerity of leadership, what you're trying to accomplish, how you're trying to accomplish it, the transparency with which you're trying to do it, all relates to how you are and how you're viewed. And that doesn't mean it's contrary to a capitalistic motive. You can do good things and you can do them the right way. And those things last a long time, because a happy workforce is an engaged workforce. An engaged workforce is a productive workforce. People who are worried every day that their job is going to go, they're not going to be productive. They're going to make mistakes. Well, those mistakes are going to cost you a lot more than bumping their salary to a living wage. You know, so I think my philosophy on leadership is you have to be active, you have to give a damn, or you have to care, and you have to lead from the front.
But when you lead from the front, right? Like, okay, so there's this for Susan, the CEO of YouTube. I think she's the ex-CEO. What she did was she would cut off her work schedule at 6 p.m. sharp. Yeah. And so, I mean, YouTube has been pretty successful, obviously.
Yeah.
So how do you, I mean, that definitely reflects poorly on the employees, like maybe, like the CEO, she's like cutting off her time. Yeah. How do you go about, would you say that's like putting yourself at the front, like putting those extra hours in? What do you define as putting yourself at the front?
So I love the way that she thinks. And so I'll tell you, over the last 20 plus years, I've had vendors, I've had partners, give me free trips to Augusta, Georgia for the US Open. So look, I already am away from my family enough. I have no desire to go on a junket. Yeah. Let's have dinner tonight. I said, look, I'll eat with my family. I don't want to eat with you. You want to spend 15 minutes, grab a coffee during the main part of the day? I'm happy to do that. And I think those are the choices. And I think when employees see leadership model that, they realize that it's okay to have a life and it's okay to draw the line. There's a stark difference between what I saw growing up in Canada and working in Canada over the last, the first 25 years of my life, 26, versus the last 25 years of my life in the U.S. In the U.S., you kind of live to work. Healthcare is not paid. Social services aren't readily available. Education is really expensive. There's a lot of things that are expensive. In Canada, it's almost like it's a flip, right? Work is part of who you are, but it's not the prime directive. And I think that work-life balance was a lot easier for me to establish in Canada and enjoy in Canada than it's ever been in the U.S. And I think leaders, if they have the ability to model for their teams and their employees, it's okay to do that. And yeah, there's a balance at which point it's a 9-to-5 job. I'm not paying you 9 to 9. So, and employees will see, they'll say, oh, the boss left at 7. I got to stay till 7. God, no. I'm not, you as an employee are not paid the same as a CEO. Don't kid yourself, right? Because that's the wrong point of comparison. And so I think any leader that demonstrates and articulates that and models that behavior is the right thing to do.
And I think it goes the other way too. Like, for example, Elon Musk at Twitter, he made it so it's completely the opposite, where it's like he wants the employees to stay like the full 12-hour days. But then I guess there's certain people that will come towards that business that want that, and there's some people, but not everyone wants that. And so I guess establishing that early on is probably important.
Transparency.
It is
transparent.
Elon Musk is a very polarizing individual. And I think if you did a satisfaction HR engagement survey at Tesla, you'd find a very different or a stark difference in terms of that work. People are sleeping in their offices. I don't know anybody who enjoys doing that, right? I mean, and the fact of the matter is Elon can do that because he's got $300 billion, right? That's great for him. I don't know anybody else in Tesla who's got that same. He's got a unique comp structure that's specifically designed for Elon Musk that's worth about $55 billion. No one else is a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of that comp structure. And so I think that's my own perspective. I think that's a silly expectation to put on employees. When now, if Elon wants to open up his $300 billion to the other folks who are going to be doing the same thing and slogging the same hours he's doing, then there's a risk reward benefit that goes with that. But today that doesn't exist.
And going back to a point that you made before, you said that your first 25, 26 years of your life, you stayed in Canada and then you moved to the States where you saw a dramatic shift.
Yep.
Would you say that if someone's looking to be very successful as you are, sometimes that change is necessary? Sometimes you do have to go through that slog, a couple of years of your life where you really have to just put your head down and focus and work and work and work. And then you can worry, or you can look after your work-life balance afterwards.
Well, so this is a really good question. I'm smiling because I've had this conversation with my son and daughter since they were like 5 years old. I said, there's going to come a time where you're going to have the opportunity to go to school. And I said that in university, that 8 years from the late teens to the mid-20s, if you slog hard, you'll enjoy the next 80 years of your life. If you have a great time and you party for that 7 to 8 years, you'll have a great time, but then you'll slog it for the next 80. I said, I'd rather have you enjoy 80 years of your life and give yourself the choice to do the things you want to do when and where and how you want to do them. That means, and I think the intensity, again, just my own personal perspective, the intensity of the efforts that you are and your peers are at right now, this is the defining moments of your life. And the harder that you work, the more that you take on, the harder you push yourself, that will pay off dividend after dividend in the future. And in the U.S., I don't see it much in Canada, but in the U.S., there's an annual list of the best party schools, the best party universities. Shockingly, that's what attracts a lot of students. Wouldn't be my choice and wasn't my children's choice. And, but whatever floats your boat. If you want to rent an apartment and have a 10-year-old car and, do a vacation every 4 years down the street, great. That's your choice. I wouldn't want that to be the choice for people I love.
It's all what you prioritize, sacrifices, but the sacrifices pay off. And you got to choose your sacrifices, I guess.
You have to. I mean, we've been given the gift of life, but we only have one in this life. Your choice is, how do you want to take the time? How do you want to optimize? How do you want to create the best version of you? Sometimes you realize that too late. Hopefully, folks your age don't.
Michelangelo had a very good quote that says, "The greater danger for most of us lies not in settling our aim too high and falling short, but in setting our aim too low and achieving our mark."
Yeah.
So you're obviously someone who has set high aims and achieved a lot of them. How do you stay motivated? How do you continue to work on things that are really impactful, that are impacting millions, tens of millions of people? How do you maintain that motivation in your life?
I wish I had a perfect answer for that. I don't think I have a perfect answer. I can tell you that what motivates me is a combination of the need to continue to learn and evolve. I don't think you ever stop learning, because at that point, punch your ticket. My golf game isn't great, so it's not I don't think I'll ever retire. That's not the way I'm wired either. I think it's the ability to make a contribution, because I think I think spiritually there's a reason why we're here, and it's to balance this life and the next. That means, can you make a contribution? Can you help others? Are there ways to do that? And there's many ways to do that. I constantly look for, again, that's what attracted me to Wysa. It's what attracted me to the AI-based radiology solution, is things that I can help bring to market that can make an impact. And hopefully, if we do enough of those well, we'll leave the place better than what we found it.
Yeah. So it's a mix of curiosity, you'd say, and the need to help other people, and the combination of those two can take you.
Yeah, I think and don't get me wrong, I'm not Gandhi, right? So, I don't pretend to be. There is the ability to see new things, be involved in exciting, businesses that ultimately have an outcome that makes it the right incentive. But the right incentive doesn't have to be singular in nature. It doesn't just have to be a profit motive. you can make money and still drive good impact. Those aren't mutually exclusive. You just got to find the right opportunities that can do both.
What's next for you for the next like 5 to 10 years? Are you going to continue working on Wysa? Do you have any other huge plans?
Again, we launched the AI-based radiology solution. So that's a company called Avant AI, and so we want to commercialize that. We want to continue to penetrate the market with Wysa and make a difference there. I do a lot of work with senior executive teams. I meet with a lot of teams. I love doing consulting engagements like that. It keeps me fresh, keeps me engaged. And I love the ability to share kind of the mistakes I made over the last 30 years with new executives that are kind of forging their own path. So I think it's a combination of things for me. It will be, as it's been for the last probably 10 years since I left corporate America, the ability to do multiple things simultaneously, because I'm not sure if I have ADD or if I just short attention span, but the reality is I love having my hands in many things because it keeps me focused and keeps me interested.
Wow.
And are you coming to any future events at UFT?
I'd love to. I love I love the ability of being around the energy of smart folks. It keeps me young, which is good. And I'd love to kind of engage. I was fortunate enough to be one of the judges at the Innovators Den, and it was great to see the pitches from the teams. And what was even more engaging was the conversations I had afterwards. It was just the energy and the excitement that I could see in the faces of the participants was just very infectious.
If you had a magic phone and you could broadcast one message to the entire world, what would it be?
Wow, that's a good one. I would say be patient with yourself, lean into challenges, and it's okay to make mistakes. Probably three things that I if I could help folks think about that, those are the things I think will help shape their experiences and keep their confidence.
Yeah, awesome. I think that's a great way to wrap it up.
Yes.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you guys.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure having you. I think amazing conversation.
Great.
Excited to see where Wysa goes.
Yeah, me too. Hopefully we'll get some help and be able to do something really interesting there as well.
Perfect. Awesome. All right, if you made it this far, thank you guys so much. Please hit the like button, subscribe button, and leave your suggestions below in the comments. See you guys next time.